The Dorhai Empire had a ceremony for everything. There was a ceremony for the first kill, a ceremony for the 10th, a ceremony for surviving one's 100th battle, which involved 3 days of ritual fasting and the public recitation of every enemy fallen by your hand. A list, for the most decorated warriors, that could take hours to speak aloud. There was even a ceremony for dying well, a formalized process of last words and posture, and the exact angle at which a Dorhai soldier was expected to face the killing blow. What they did not have, what their culture had not bothered to develop in 700 years of organized warfare, was a ceremony for crying. Not because Dorhai did not feel. They felt enormously. Their emotional architecture was, by most xenopsychological assessments, richer and more volatile than the human equivalent. They simply believed, with the deep, unquestioned certainty of a species that had never been seriously challenged, that feeling and showing were two entirely different things, and only one of them was acceptable in a warrior. The other was weakness. Commander Rylan Vale, decorated 8 times, veteran of 4 campaigns, survivor of the Kethvar border wars and the Sivari Purge and the massacre at Valorith Station, had not shown weakness in 31 years of service. He lasted 14 days around the human woman before everything he had built collapsed like paper armor in the rain. Galactic Exploration Core Integration Unit, Station Varith, 9. Cycle 7 of the Dorhai Human Coalition Accord. Her name was Corporal Vera Aldane. She was 26 years old, which in Dorhai terms made her approximately adolescent. She stood 5 feet 4 inches. She weighed, in full gear, perhaps 70 kilograms. Her hair was dark and she kept it pulled back in a way that several Dorhai soldiers found unsettling. Not because it was aggressive, but because it was practical, and practicality in grooming suggested a mind always already moving toward the next problem. She had been assigned to Ryland's unit as part of the Coalition's integration protocol. Cultural exchange, tactical cross-training, learning each other's methods before they fought together. Ryland had accepted the assignment with the quiet, impeccable politeness of a man who found the entire concept mildly offensive and intended to demonstrate that through flawless professionalism. He had met humans before. He knew what they were: quick, adaptive, unreasonably stubborn, dangerous in the specific way that mammals evolved under high gravity tend to be dangerous. He respected their combat capability. He did not expect to be affected by their company. He had not accounted for Vera Aldane specifically. It started on the 3rd day. One of the younger soldiers in the unit, a 19-year-old named Durath who had enlisted 6 months ago and not yet hardened into the emotional stone that Dorhai military culture required, had received news from home. His clutch sibling, the closest equivalent to a twin that Dorhai biology produced, had been killed in a training accident. Durath received the notification at 0600 hours. By 0700, he was in formation, standing at perfect attention, his face carved into the correct expression, the neutral, forward-facing mask that said, "I am a soldier, and this did not touch me." His commanding officer had already noted the loss in his file and moved on. That was protocol. That was respect, in Dorhai terms. The acknowledgement that a warrior could bear his grief without requiring others to carry it for him. Rylan was running the morning briefing when he noticed Vera was not in her seat. She was standing beside Durath, not saying anything, not doing anything. Technically, her hands were at her sides. She was facing the same direction he was. She was in no way disrupting the formation. But she had moved from her assigned position to stand shoulder to shoulder with the younger soldier, close enough that their arms were almost touching, and she had simply stayed there. Rylan watched Dareth's jaw work. Once, twice. The younger soldier did not cry. That would never happen, not in formation, not in front of everyone. But something in his shoulders changed. Something let go, incrementally, the way a fist unclenches when it has held too long and can hold no more. After the briefing, Rylan found Vera alone in the equipment bay. "What were you doing?" he said. It wasn't quite a question. She looked up from the gear she was checking, standing next to someone who needed it. He didn't ask for that. No. She went back to her work. He wouldn't have. Rylan stood there for a moment longer than he intended. "It is not our custom," he said finally. "I know," she said. "It's mine." He watched her after that. Clinically, he told himself. Academically, understanding how humans operated in unit cohesion was tactically relevant. What he observed was difficult to categorize. She remembered things. Insignificant things. That Koveth took his rations without the supplemental protein because of a digestive sensitivity he'd mentioned once in passing. That Sergeant Thera preferred her debriefs in writing rather than verbal because she processed information differently under stress. Vera never commented on these things. She simply accommodated them, quietly, as though it cost her nothing, as though she had a pocket in her mind specifically shaped for other people's small needs. She laughed easily. Too easily, Ryland thought at first, the laughter of someone who didn't take things seriously. But he began to notice that her laughter always coincided with tension draining from a room, that it arrived precisely when something was about to calcify into conflict and dissolved it before it could harden. It was a weapon, he realized. The most disarming weapon he had ever encountered, because it didn't look like one. And she touched people. Not inappropriately. Not in any way that violated protocol. A hand on a shoulder. 2 fingers on a forearm when she was making a point. The briefest pressure at the elbow when she passed someone in a narrow corridor. The door high in the unit flinched at first. Physical contact outside of combat was not their custom. And then, over days, they stopped flinching. And then, over more days, Ryland noticed something that genuinely alarmed him. They were seeking her proximity. Thera, who had never voluntarily stood less than 2 meters from any colleague, had started sitting beside Vera at meals. Durath followed her through the corridors like something in him had oriented toward her warmth. Even Koveth, old, scarred, 22 years in service and thoroughly armored against sentiment, had begun to find reasons to run equipment checks at the same time she did. Ryland put it in his report as unusual human social dynamics with integrative effect on unit cohesion. He didn't write the part that was harder to categorize. The part about himself. It happened on the 14th day. They had completed a training simulation, extraction scenario, high casualties, the kind of scenario designed to be failed so that soldiers learned something from failing it. Ryland's unit had done well, but not well enough, and 3 of the simulation's survivors had been pulled out injured, including Durath, whose leg had taken real damage when a training rig malfunctioned. It was not serious. He would recover in days. Ryland stood in the medical bay afterward and watched the healers work and told himself he was conducting a post-exercise assessment. He was cataloging errors. He was mentally drafting the corrective training schedule. He was not thinking about Valorith Station, where he had lost 11 soldiers in a single afternoon, where he had filed the reports and attended the ceremonies and stood at perfect attention through all of it without showing anything at all, and where he had then returned to his quarters and sat in the dark for 6 hours because there was nowhere else to put what was inside him and no acceptable way to release it. He had done that alone. For 31 years, he had done everything alone, because that was what strength meant. You did not distribute your pain. You did not ask others to carry what was yours. You built your walls high and your face still, and you endured, because endurance was the only currency that mattered. He didn't hear Vera come to stand beside him. He only realized she was there because of the warmth, that characteristic human warmth, that biological furnace quality that the Dorhai found unsettling. She was standing exactly as she had stood beside Durath on that first morning, shoulder to shoulder, facing the same direction, not looking at him. "I'm fine," Ryland said. Immediately, reflexively. "The way you say a thing when it is least true." "I know," she said. And then she didn't say anything else. She simply stayed. And something in Ryland Vale, something that had been mortared shut for 31 years with ceremony and protocol and the correct expression at all times, developed a crack so thin it was almost invisible. Almost. He did not cry in the human sense. Dorhai physiology expressed emotional overwhelm differently. A low vibration in the chest cavity, a color shift at the edges of the secondary eyelids, the jaw setting hard against something that had no outlet. Vera didn't comment on any of it. She stood beside him, and she was warm, and she was present, and she asked absolutely nothing of him. "How do you do that?" he said finally. His voice came out different than he intended. Rougher. A commander's voice worn down to something underneath. "Do what?" "Know when someone needs." He stopped. The sentence didn't have an acceptable ending in Dorhai. "This." She was quiet for a moment. "I was taught," she said, "that strength isn't how much you can carry alone. It's knowing when to let someone stand next to you." Ryland looked at the ceiling of the medical bay. He thought about 31 years of dark quarters and filed reports and ceremonies for everything except this. That is not how we define strength, he said. No. Her voice was gentle in the way that things are gentle when they are not apologizing for themselves. How's that working out? He put something different in his report that evening. Human integration into Dorhai units presents unexpected tactical advantage. Their capacity for proximity, for remaining present without demand, functions as a cohesion mechanism unlike anything in our training doctrine. It does not weaken soldiers. It appears, against all expectation, to make them harder to break. He paused. Then he added one more line, which no one in the Corps would have expected from Commander Ryland Vale. Decorated 8 times, 31 years of unbroken stillness. I intend to learn from it. We were never soft. We were never weak. We simply learned, long ago, that the strongest thing a person can do is let someone else stand beside them in the dark. We just forgot to explain that to the rest of the galaxy. We're getting around to it.